In India, it's a remarkable time right now for non-Bollywood and non-traditional music being created. What people refer to as the indie scene in this country, and there's a great many really good bands, acts, individual musicians. It's very fertile, but it's also fertile in the best sense that the creative output is of a very high quality and is getting better and better. Bands that I'm digging, just names off the top of my head: Scrat from Chennai, Supersonics from Calcutta, Scavengers from Delhi, Spud in the Box from Bombay, Nicholson from Bombay, Sand Dunes, the F-16s from Chennai, Avial from Kerala. There's so much, man. There's so much really good stuff happening these days, and I've only scratched the surface. There's a lot more. Singers, and or songwriters globally who I consider masters. Well, there are so many. Very honestly, there are just so many, and sometimes it's an individual, sometimes it's a collective. I can only talk about the musicians that have influenced me most tangibly and most palpably in the years since I was interested in music. When I was very young, when I was in school, it was bands like The Who, Led Zeppelin, Santana, Steely Dan, Deep Purple, Pink Floyd, of course, Yes, Rush, the Beatles. As songwriters, Pete Townsend of The Who, McCartney and Lennon of the Beatles, of course, George Harrison, a few of his songs as well. So many. In the later years, the years following that, people like, well, from then Bob Dylan, of course, Sting, so many, man. I can go on and on. Paul Simon. More recently, I would say not very recent, but more recently, Bjork, Foo Fighters, Porcupine Tree, Steven Wilson by himself. There's so much going on. That's on the global level. The great thing about digital music creation and distribution really is the entire chain. It's the whole thread of conceptualizing to creating to producing and to disseminating. So what's happening in the digital world these days, and the actual material world as well, the physical world, is that the technology has made it a lot more accessible for people to get involved and control, so to speak, the entire chain of events from ideating to finally sharing it. So music software these days, computer-based systems, make it a lot easier for people to record stuff at home. We still need good recording studios, but you don't need them as much as we did in the past. You don't have to do everything in a recording studio. There's a certain amount of stuff you can do on your hard disk based system. A lot of people, electronic musicians, will create practically everything on their hard disk based system. Musicians like me who mix programming with live instrumentation do a combination of the two. So it's become a lot more accessible for people like me to do a lot of pre-production at home, a certain amount of production at home as well, my home studio setup. I'll enhance that with studio-based activity, maybe vocal takes and things like that. If I want to record horn parts, for example, I really want to go into a studio that can record them well, with good preamps, good microphones and that kind of stuff, designed for that purpose. Mixing, again, it's all done by mixing engineers in their own setups these days, which are home-based setups. And then there's the rest of the online world, which is social media, of course, to create a certain buzz around the stuff that you've put out. Online-based listening services, streaming services like SoundCloud, and even selling services like iTunes and Bandcamp and things. And that's it, and you can market yourself on the internet. So the online digital-based universe is pretty damn good. The downside, there's always a downside. Everything is yin and yang. Everything is positive and negative, just as energy is not necessarily in a moralistic or a moral sense. The downside, of course, is the uncontrollable file sharing. Now, I don't use the term piracy because for me, piracy is when you are profiting from it, when someone is downloading a bunch of stuff that he or she hasn't paid for and then is selling it. That is piracy. But the rampant file sharing that takes place through peer-to-peer systems, BitTorrent systems and stuff is just an inevitability of all of this stuff, right? So it's the, I won't even call it the dark cloud to the silver lining. It's just one element of things. I still see the silver lining in that dark cloud, if you want to call it that, is that the file sharing has just made the whole prospect of going viral that much more likely. So if a lot of people are sharing your music and not paying for it, it's still a lot of people really appreciating what you've created. And even if they aren't paying for the actual music that you've put out, the song file itself, it's very likely if so many people are enjoying it and so many people are sharing it, that they'll probably come to your concert to watch you play. And that leads to other bigger things as well, so it's okay. It's all fine. The most important thing would be finding your own voice. It's very, very important. We start out by emulating other musicians, as we did as well, as I did as a singer and as a songwriter and as a live performer. You want to be like your heroes. You try and emulate them. You play their songs. You maybe pose like them. You maybe dress like them. But that is the nascent part of your growth. That's the beginning, if at all. Maybe not. Maybe you found your voice from day one. Great. But through the entire process, it's about finding your voice. It's finding not your identity. An identity is a fake thing. It's your sense of self. What is your truest form of expression? When I say voice, I don't necessarily mean the human voice. That too. But you could be a guitar player with a distinctive voice. You could be a drummer with a very individualistic voice. It's your style. It's what expresses what is your truest form of expression. Other things, this is a bit of advice that keyboard player, the indiscreet keyboard player Zubin very rightly gives newer musicians, is be professional. The one thing that has, when we make this differentiation between India and the West, a differentiation that's blurring these days, I'm happy to say, and I say, when I'm talking about the best part of that blur, is that the quality of music, the quality of songwriting, the quality of production, the quality of performance, the ability, those are all blurring. A friend of mine recently made a comment that you can't tell an Indian band from a Western band anymore. And what she meant was that in all aspects, in terms of songwriting, in terms of production, in terms of performance, we're on par with the best in the West. And this is mostly true, not entirely, mostly true. What has separated us from them in not the best possible way has been lack of professionalism. And that's something that really goes a long way. As far as we are concerned, and I'm really happy to say that we've been lucky enough to always find in our realm, in our teams, really, really good people. Even today, whether it's with Indiscreet or Whirling Kalapas or stuff that I do by myself, I find myself and I surround myself with people who I consider the best in their field. Not only in terms of their ability to do what they're doing, whether they're sound engineers, light engineers, tour managers, guitar techs, whatever it is, or of course, very importantly, fellow musicians, but they are incredibly good human beings as people because they're easy to get along with, but they respect your time. And I think it's very, very important to respect and be considerate to the time of others, whether it's people you work with in close proximity or otherwise. Respect is the most important thing. Too often musicians over here are lax about these things. It's not a good thing. It's not cool. You may think it's really cool for your image to show up 1.5 hours late for rehearsal. It's going to work against you. You're going to rehearsal at 9 o'clock, show up at 9 o'clock. That's it. And do your bit. Do your homework. If you're a sessions musician, do your homework, make your charts show up. The better prepared you are, the deeper you are going to remain in the consciousness of that person who hired you, the more likely you're going to be called back. Just remember that. And the better you will feel about your playing, because the better prepared you are, the more confident you will be, the happier you will be, because this is what you do. Your work is the most important thing to you, I would hope. It is for me. And the better you do your work, the better you'll feel about yourself. The better you feel about yourself, the happier you'll be.